Welcome to the LawyerFair.co.uk daily podcast. LawyerFair helps businesses find the right lawyer at the fairest price. But on this podcast, we just chew the fat with some great guests.
Oh my goodness! Oh, there we go. Sorry.
Talking of celebrations,
thankfully. Yes, celebrations are plenty. But in the interests of transparency and full disclosure, we are actually having to record podcast 100 a second time because that champagne cork, it didn't actually kill anybody as it popped out. But unfortunately, for some reason, the recording that we subsequently made, which was supposed to be our celebratory podcast 100, was corrupted. We somehow had a problem with the quality of the recording, and it was just brilliant. It was gold. Polly is now on the end of the line as we record podcast 100 Mark II. I mean, tell our disappointed audience how wonderful that kind of spontaneous recording was.
I know. It was a great setting, a great cork popping moment, but it looks like we've got part 2 coming now.
Yes, we did try and record this. We did record it with our colleague Simon in London a day or so ago, and yes, unfortunately, having had a great time with a bottle of Prosecco and some wonderful spontaneous ad-libbing, it all rather went to dust with some problem with the recording itself. So here we are. We are doing a second take of podcast 100. You are our dear audience, clinging on for life with us, and many of you, or some of you, may have followed our journey with the previous 99, because we launched the LawyerFair podcast back in June. Someone had the very good idea of doing a daily podcast, which was great until we realised we had to do it every day. But I have to say, Polly, we have just about got there. I call it the almost daily podcast. What about you?
Yeah, I'd call it a We're Getting There daily podcast. But we do well.
It's not the most overwhelmingly enthusiastic endorsement. If we marketed ourselves as the We're Getting There podcast, well, maybe we'd get more listeners than we do. I don't know. But this is a bit of a self-indulgent, Christmassy celebration of what we've achieved, really. And we're going to do a little show that reflects on the previous 99. And as I say, we launched it back in June. We didn't really have a great idea of what we wanted to do with it. We just felt that with Serial and various other podcasts, that it was a kind of a genre that was coming back into fashion to some extent.
Definitely.
And it allowed us, and has allowed us, to reach out to a lot of amazing people. I really genuinely have loved it. I didn't have any experience or knowledge of what to do with these things, and we kind of learned as we went along, but it's almost as if it's had its own momentum, Polly, hasn't it, in terms of the quality of guests and some of the content that we've had. It just seems to be getting better and better.
Yeah, it's definitely grown, and I think along with the people we meet at networking events, it's always such a great introduction, and to talk to these people and find out more about their background. And obviously it's not always about business, it's about how they actually got to where they are at the moment, so it's always interesting stuff.
It is, and we've spoken to professors and QCs and authors and award-winning entrepreneurs. We've had some of the UK's top business advisors, and officially one of the UK's happiest people. More of it shortly. And I think if you are a small business or a startup or whatever stage you are, frankly, and you're looking at various marketing initiatives, for us, it's been fantastic. It's enabled us to really reach out and show a bit of our personality, have some great content. We've also spun some of the chats that we've had into articles and kind of atomised the content. So it's been a really successful vehicle for us. It's also been a huge amount of fun, and we've met some great people and developed some really interesting relationships from it. So from Arizona to British Columbia to Singapore to Perivale, I noticed. We've been chatting to people all over the world. And so we are going to do a very short kind of award ceremony to some extent, Polly, aren't we? So are you going to put in a drum roll on this, or are we just going to imagine a drum roll?
Well, we can imagine, we can edit, we can make noise effects, whatever. Are you in your suit and tie over there?
I am not. No, so I'm in my kind of post-Christmas party, slightly hungover phase. So I'm pleased that this is audio, as I am with most of them. But I'm going to actually come back to that reference about audio and video with one of the awards later. So, Polly, lead us in. What's the first award?
Right, let's kick this off. So the first category is Most Inspiring Podcast or podcast guest?
Well, but bear in mind, this has not been selected by audience. This is purely selected by me. So, and when I say inspiring, I mean this is about either the subject or the individual. And there's 2 or 3 candidates for this, Polly. One of our very early podcasts, and I'm going to actually reference the number just in case anybody is vaguely interested. But podcast 13 was with Julia Salaski from Crowd Justice. Now, some of our early podcast guests, I have to say, it was a rather a leap of faith for them to come on board with us. Yeah. I'm going to reference here podcast 4, which was Amita from Tech City, Amita Parikh, who I've now met subsequently many times. And it really was a leap of faith for her because we hadn't had any guests until that stage. So for her to get involved was great. But Julia launched Crowd Justice, which is a brilliant kind of crowd funding process or platform for people to raise money for legal cases. And she has since, I have to say, I like to think that we basically set her on her way, but she has since done some really high-profile stuff and is being lauded for what she's doing, quite rightly so. But so Julia definitely in the frame. I'm not going to award Julia with the most inspiring podcast because she's having lots of success elsewhere. There was also, I have to say, a quick reference as well to Dana Denise Smith, who is the founder of Obelisk Support, because she, as we started off actually as a bit of a legal stroke business podcast, and it's kind of morphed a bit more into business, I have to say. But some of the early stuff was legal based, and Dana has launched what's a really interesting project. It's called The First 100 Years of Women in Law, and a great lady as well. And Obelisk Support's a great product. But that project, I mean, it's a real a slow burner. It's going through to, I think it's 2019, Polly, isn't it? It's a 4 or 5 year project. But a great celebration of women in law, and extraordinary how little time ago it was that there were basically no women in law, and the challenges for them to get into law were extraordinarily difficult.
I second that insight into that project. It's amazing. Everyone should go take a look at it. It's very cool.
Absolutely. But no, the award goes to our great friend Charlotte. Charlotte Roach from Rabble, and she is the CEO and founder of Rabble, which is a fantastic kind of exercise concept. But Charlotte's story, I mean, I was vaguely aware of Charlotte's story when we got her onto the podcast, but then she started telling us about it. and honestly, I mean, I think I was suffering from a small niggly back during that particular recording, and all of my kind of man flu type symptoms evaporated, because Charlotte was and this was podcast 84. Charlotte was essentially training for the Olympics and was almost certainly going to go to London 2012. And she'd suffered a most awful car crash, and a near fatal car crash. And from that, essentially, the Olympic career was ruined. But she kind of emerged from that, and not only has launched this business, but as Simon was telling us the other day, she kind of also cycled, I think, from Beijing to London.
Yeah, I can't believe that. It's amazing.
Extraordinary. And so Charlotte came on the podcast, and we'd met her, I think, through the pitch. And I was aware of some background of this story, and then she told us it. And if you want to be inspired about how to recover from something pretty traumatic, then do listen to that. So Charlotte carries that all the way. What's the next one, Polly?
Okay, so the next one is, I like this actually, Spring in Your Step Award.
Spring in Your Step Award. Spring in Your Step Award is about the people that I've chatted to who kind of left me, and I hope the audience, with just a little spring in the step. And there are, I have to say, many candidates. I had to leave out a couple because I'm going to refer to them later. So a couple of honourable mentions. Coming in onto the podium has to be Danny Bent.
Yeah,
podcast 86. Danny would probably have won this award if it were not for the fact, because if you listen to it, you'll understand why. The guy is just a kind of energy ball. But he has also been officially nominated as one of the UK's happiest people.
Crazy.
So, amazing. So I don't think he needs the LawyerFair Spring in Your Step Award to add to his baubles. So Danny definitely in there. I have to say personally, podcast 93, Emma Jones from Enterprise Nation, who is a highly successful lady, and you can see why, a really wonderful person and lots of extraordinary energy and ideas. We were delighted to have Emma on board. But I tell you who I'm going to give this award to, Polly. Have you any idea?
I have no idea who you're going to give this to.
I'm going to give this to my great friend Yuan Zhang at Sift Media.
Yes, yeah, good call.
Good call. Podcast 59. We actually encountered Ewan on two levels, I guess. One was that he was very kind to give us some feedback about earlier podcasts and said he'd be interested in coming on board. And we did this recording with him, which was about it was about authenticity in business, and it kind of dovetailed with the whole Jeremy Corbyn bandwagon, and it was about authenticity and integrity, and it's a really fascinating subject. And I love talking to Ewan about it. And then we got to meet Ewan, who is a small business publisher at SIF Media and is heavily involved in the pitch, of which we were involved in this year. And he's just a top guy. He's just one of these guys who is just fantastically positive and friendly. And I think I have to say, with the pitch, is just the key for that particular award ceremony. So I'm glad you're endorsing that, Polly, because I thought there was a lot of candidates, but Ewan, you take it away.
A shout out to Ewan for that one.
Shout out to Ewan. So I'm going to do a little drum roll here. Next one.
Go for it. Most overused word.
Most overused word. Well, there is undoubtedly one, and that is the word journey.
I have to agree with that.
That is the word journey. The challenge I had, not being particularly trained or schooled in these things, was I kind of rather instinctively chatter away with the people that come on board. And actually, a lot of them, if not most of them, have had a journey of some kind. And I just found myself kind of falling into this phrase to such an extent that I think about halfway through, around about 50 or 60, I was actually writing it on a pad not to say this word. It was becoming so part of my kind of interviewing DNA. And then you meet someone like Charlotte, where there's almost no other word for what she went through. But yes, journey has been banned. It's been, I don't know what else I can use. I don't know what else I have been using. But please, do not tease me into saying that word during future podcasts. So, journey in the sort of room 101 of words.
I have heard the word journey and edited out a few times, Andrew.
You are cheeky. So you can imagine how many were said if you've been editing some of them out. But there we go. Okay, next one.
Next one is best freebies.
Best freebies. Can I tell you, we are not like the BBC. We accept all inducements, product placements. We are happy to promote anybody and everybody on our fledgling podcast. I think the most disappointing failure to provide a gift was Hugo. Podcast 58. Now, Hugo from Vandel's Brewery was about to launch the brewery, and sadly, there hasn't been a barrel rolling down to the LawyerFair HQ. So, Hugo, slightly disappointing that our promotion of your startup has not led to the delivery of much alcohol. But I think I'm going to give this out to 61, Podcast 61, which was Tamara, founder of Rebel Kitchen, a coconut milk-based drink, which I have to say, and she delivered gallons of it to us, we absolutely loved. Did you get any? I'm not sure if they were still there by the time you got back to the office.
No, I didn't grab any of that, but I mean, I've seen it online and it looks amazing, to be honest, so you're going to have to save me some next time. Well,
Tamara, hats off to you. Not only was it very kind of you to send, they were delicious, and my little 2-year-old consumed a good number of them, I have to say. So every time we go to Waitrose, there is a shout for Rebel Kitchen. So Tamara, fantastic gifts, and anybody who's on future podcasts, please don't feel guilty or embarrassed about sending anything in. Okay, next one. Next one is, sorry, the host hasn't got a clue award. Sorry, the host hasn't got a clue award. Right, well, this actually, I got to tell you, one of the challenges of running daily podcasts, and probably one of the reasons why we're going to turn them into slightly more weekly ones, is alongside running a startup, I did sometimes find it quite difficult to carve out time for research. So there would be occasional chats, particularly when there were chats that were kind of away from my knowledge base or slightly more technical. As you know, Polly, I'm not a man of great technical capabilities. So there was the occasional podcast where I was really kind of struggling to floundering like a puppy out at sea. I think, we had a number of really interesting guests on board with quite technical products. I have to say we're going to explore more in 2016 some of the really interesting stuff that's coming through the legal tech space. And Jason joined us from New York with a product called Consultation, which I did kind of get the head around initially, but there was some fairly highbrow stuff that Jason was throwing in my direction that I was kind of having to slightly Google whilst we were chatting. But I think the other one that really caught me out was 52, which was a chat with a chap called Martin Nygate, who is based in Singapore with a telecoms product called Nanu, which again, I don't know whether it was just very early in the morning or I just didn't have any clue what he was talking about. But there were moments with Martin where I was thinking, I'm not sure what the next question is going to be, but I think I escaped. But there is actually a kind of something in all this, is that we are actually going to probably turn these into slightly more detailed and weekly podcasts, just so that there is the opportunity to go into more detail and hopefully to enable the host not to be floundering quite so often. Although I think generally, Polly, I got away with it. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think you did well. Hopefully the weekly ones will avoid the frantic Googling on the side. Yeah, I got that. Sorry, say that again.
Yes, there was the occasional frantic background noise of Weaver trying to find something on Wikipedia. So listen, we're going to wrap this up because it's been fun for us. I'm not sure how many other people are actually still listening, apart from your mum, obviously, who's a great loyal listener. So the final two awards are...
Okay, so we've got the worst podcast.
The worst podcast. There is undoubtedly only one contender for this. None of our guests who are listening need to be shuffling uncomfortably in their seat, because this is not about guests. This is actually about It's about one of those situations where I'm sure lots of you do the same thing. I sometimes, when I get a bee in my bonnet and I think I'm going to do something, I'm going to launch something, I'm going to finish something, I sometimes do it without necessarily thinking about the context or the background situation. So we decided to launch these podcasts at the beginning of June, and I found myself in Bilbao, staying with my lovely Spanish in-laws, and because of the situation I was in, I had to record the very first podcast in the front room of my Spanish mother-in-law's flat in Bilbao, which I have to tell you, you can actually easily find this because it's on podcast number 1. It has not really changed much since the Franco era, and there are pieces of art on Mama Garcia's wall that wouldn't have been out, probably would have been available in 1969 in Bilbao, let alone in 2015. They are slightly dated, and I was sitting there rather cramped with a set of headphones trying to record this thing, and I have to say it has been subjected to considerable ridicule by the people within LawyerFair Towers ever since. So I think from that and I still stuck with it, I still sent it out, there we go, we probably should have reflected. But I think from those rather inauspicious beginnings at Podcast 1, we have done rather well, but that was undoubtedly the worst one.
So would you like the link with this on the page?
No, I think people can discover that if they really want to at another time. So we are on to the final award.
Okay, this is a big drum roll and definitely the highlight of Podcast 100 awards ceremony. It would have to be the favourite podcast.
Favourite podcast. And again, this is based very much on personal choice. I suspect if we put this out to a poll that there would be a variety of different results. But I've got 3 people I'd like to reference. The first is Podcast 32 and Gary Bell, QC, very eminent QC, who was basically coming on board to chat about social mobility, and which was obviously was wonderful and interesting, and I was very pleased to have him on board talking about it. However, we were slightly distracted, being fellow Nottingham Forest fans, by a discussion about the worst manager in the world, which was David Platt, and it was a personally very enjoyable, because you know what it's like, Polly, you being a Liverpool fan, when you meet someone who you can share your pain with.
Yeah, it's very true.
It's just it takes over the conversation. So whereas undoubtedly there was some interesting chat about Gary's own journey. There you go. From a Nottinghamshire pit village to the heights of the bar, our conversation about David Platt for me was fantastic. So that's one. I got to say a large hurrah to Guy Blaskey, the founder, CEO, entrepreneur of Pooch and Mutt, which he very kindly joined us, and Pooch and Mutt are flying. Guy is making fantastic headway with that company, and so to have Guy on board and for him to talk to us, it was really cool and some really interesting stuff. That was podcast 75. But I'm going to give the award of favourite podcast to someone who's become a bit of a friend of LawyerFair, actually, and we recorded our aborted podcast yesterday in one of his offices, and that's David Hellard from ZipCube. Podcast 83. It's been quite a year for David, the highlight of which must have been his podcast with LawyerFair. But he is multi-award winning. I think he won Mass Challenge, or certainly won one part of Mass Challenge. And ZipCube is a marketplace for meeting rooms, and it was via ZipCube that we booked the meeting room for our aborted podcast. So, and David's he's a great guy. He's a fantastic enthusiast. The podcast was fun. He also does his own podcast. So from my perspective, it was, it's quite easy to kind of induce some information from him and get him chatting. And I just loved it. And he came up to me, only about a month ago, I think, and said how much he'd enjoyed it. But then also added that his own podcast, which is now only, I think, episode 10, has already made the top 100 of UK podcasts. David is that kind of guy. He likes to make you feel great about your product and just
felt great after that.
Just tell you how much better his is. But I really loved meeting him, and the podcast was great, and I love everything about David and his ZipCube product. So he takes away the Ultimate Podcast 100 LawyerFair Award. Polly,
Yeah.
I'd also like to thank you very much for your support and for being my stellar wing woman.
The wing woman of LawyerFair Podcast.
Can you have wing woman?
Sorry?
Can you have wing woman rather?
Yeah,
You got wing.
so.
You can have wing woman. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. So listen, that's been a bit of a ramble. If anybody is still listening, and I suspect there aren't that many of you, but thank you very much for listening. It's been an amazing journey for us. We've had loads of fantastic guests. We are taking a Christmas break. We're going to be back in the new year with a slightly different format, as already mentioned. We're also going to slightly separate the topics as well a little, but bags of interesting stuff coming through the system next year. So thank you very much to all our guests. Thank you, Polly. Thank you to the LawyerFair team, to our listeners, subscribers, devotees, Polly's dad, who is our greatest supporter, and to all of you, a very happy Christmas and a successful 2016. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to the LawyerFair.co.uk daily podcast. If you'd like to listen to more, why not subscribe and download each episode via iTunes, or visit us on the LawyerFair.co.uk website.